That sudden chill when you pass a quiet pond is not just the breeze. It could be a hidden phobia you never knew you had. We are uncovering the weirdest fears Americans secretly hold inside, and by the time we are done, you will probably recognize at least five of them lurking in your own mind. What if your unexplained unease around clowns or your dread of long words is more common than you think? We are about to reveal the strange anxieties we all share but rarely discuss. What hidden fear do you suspect you might be carrying? There is a peculiar anxiety that turns every pond, every park, and every piece of lawn decor into a potential surveillance post. Phobia is the irrational yet unshakable conviction that somewhere a duck is watching you. It does not matter if you are in a sealed office on the 20th floor or driving through a tunnel, the feeling persists that a single, feathered observer has you in its sights. The origins of this strange fear are often traced back to a single panel from a famous comic strip, which then snowballed into an internet legend, giving a name to a sensation many had felt but never voiced. Imagine glancing out your kitchen window and locking eyes with a duck standing motionless by the fence. For most, it is a mildly amusing moment. For someone with this phobia, it triggers a deep, visceral unease. This can lead to avoiding walks near lakes, feeling a prickle of dread at the sight of a garden gnome holding a fishing rod, or even being unsettled by a child's rubber duck in a bathtub. While the concept might sound like the setup to a joke, the anxiety it produces is completely genuine. The brain's primal threat detection system gets hijacked, sounding a constant, low-level alarm about a watcher in the reeds. It is a surreal conflict between logic and a deep-seated, feathery paranoia. This specific fear taps into something ancient within the human psyche, our deep-seated discomfort with being watched. Personifying animals is a natural human tendency, and when that instinct collides with a modern sense of constant surveillance, the result can be a bizarrely focused paranoia like this. The duck becomes a silent, judgmental witness to our most private moments, triggering a primal alarm system that logic cannot easily silence. Its widespread recognition, however, is largely thanks to pop culture. The comic strip The Far Side by Gary Larson featured a single, legendary panel that depicted a man at his office desk, with a caption stating he was under the constant fear that a duck was watching him. This single frame gave a name and a face to a nebulous anxiety, transforming it from an obscure notion into a shared cultural joke. The internet then took that seed and let it flourish. Online forums and social media platforms became breeding grounds for this idea, with countless users either genuinely seeking support for their unease or, more often, ironically claiming to suffer from the feathered gaze. This digital echo chamber has created a fascinating blur, making it difficult to distinguish between a genuine, if rare, phobia and a widespread meme that people adopt for humor and community. The line between a real psychological condition and a running internet gag has never been thinner, proving that sometimes our strangest fears are born not in trauma, but in the collective imagination. The sheer irony of its name is almost a form of psychological torture. Hippopotamonstrose squipedaliophobia is the paralyzing fear of long words, a condition where the very thing you dread is spelled out in the term used to diagnose it. This is not just a mild dislike for complex vocabulary. It is an intense, irrational anxiety that can be triggered by simply seeing a lengthy word on a page, hearing it in a conversation, or worst of all, being asked to read it aloud. Imagine the cold sweat and the racing heart that would accompany being handed a document filled with words like incomprehensibility or uncharacteristically. Your throat might tighten, your hands could shake, and your mind might go blank, gripped by a terror of stumbling, stuttering, or failing entirely. This phobia is rarely about the words themselves, but about what they represent, a potential for public humiliation and the shame of perceived intellectual inadequacy. It is a deep-seated fear of embarrassment that attaches itself to the most obvious and intimidating symbols of complexity, turning a simple sentence into a minefield of anxiety. Navigating daily life with this fear means every menu, Every instruction manual and every street sign holds a potential trigger. For a student, a classroom can become a terrifying arena, especially when a teacher calls on them to read a complex passage from a science textbook aloud. The heart pounds, the palms sweat, and the mind races, not from a lack of understanding, but from the sheer, intimidating length of the words on the page. In a professional setting, a simple meeting can turn into a nightmare when a colleague slides over a contract filled with terms like indemnification and confidentiality. The fear is not of the concepts, but of the public humiliation that might come from mispronouncing a single, monstrous word. This anxiety forces many to develop clever, often exhausting, coping mechanisms. Some become masters of substitution, instantly replacing a long word with a simpler synonym to keep the conversation flowing. Others lean heavily on technology, using text-to-speech apps to have documents read aloud to them privately before they have to face them in public. For those seeking a more permanent solution, cognitive behavioral therapy can be a lifeline. This process involves gradually and safely exposing a person to the source of their fear, helping their brain learn that these long words are not a threat. It is a slow, patient journey of rewiring a deep-seated panic into a manageable awareness. Imagine the relief of finally being able to read a medical prescription or a legal document without that familiar wave of dread. It is a quiet victory, a reclaiming of confidence in a world that often feels designed to intimidate with its vocabulary. A beard can be more than just a style choice, it can be a source of profound anxiety. Phobias is the intense, irrational fear of facial hair, a condition that transforms a simple beard or mustache into an object of dread. This is not a mere preference for a clean, shaven look. It is a visceral reaction that can trigger panic, nausea, and an overwhelming urge to flee. The sight of a full, bushy beard might cause someone's heart to race and their palms to sweat, their brain screaming a primal warning of danger where none logically exists. The roots of this fear are often buried deep in the past. For some, it stems from a frightening childhood encounter, perhaps with a relative or stranger whose bearded face became imprinted in their memory as a symbol of threat. For others, the fear is tied to broader cultural associations, linking beards with unkempt hygiene, radical ideologies, or untrustworthy characters portrayed in media. These subconscious connections can forge a powerful link between facial hair and feelings of unease or even terror. Navigating a world where beards have made a major comeback in fashion is a daily challenge. A simple coffee shop line can become a stressful ordeal if the person in front has a long, thick beard. Social interactions become a minefield, forcing difficult choices about how to avoid shaking a bearded colleague's hand without causing offense. For those dating, the prospect of intimacy can be fraught with anxiety, and popular television shows filled with beloved bearded characters become unwatchable. This phobia forces a constant, exhausting vigilance, turning everyday life into a series of calculated maneuvers to avoid the very common feature that causes such deep-seated fear. The shifting sands of American fashion have never been kind to those with phobia. For decades, the corporate world of the mid-20th century enforced a clean-shaven standard, a cultural norm that provided an unexpected refuge. The boardroom, the television screen, and the pages of magazines were largely free of the very thing that triggered their deepest anxiety. This era of smooth chins was a time of relative calm, a period where the fear could lie dormant, unchallenged by daily life. But then the trends turned. The rise of the hipster beard, the lumberjack aesthetic, and the general celebration of facial hair in the 21st century has been a perfect storm for this particular phobia. What was once a rare sight in professional and social settings is now commonplace, even fashionable. This cultural shift has forced the fear out into the open, transforming a manageable unease into a constant, daily confrontation. For one person, the beard trend might be a minor annoyance, but for someone with phobia, it feels like the world has been redecorated with their personal nightmare. Explaining this fear to others is its own unique form of social torture. How do you tell a date that you cannot look at them directly because of their well-groomed beard? a feature they are likely proud of. How do you explain to a new boss that a team meeting is causing panic attacks because a key member of the team has a thick mustache? The reaction is rarely understanding. More often, it is met with confusion, ridicule, or even offense, as if the person with the phobia is insulting a core part of someone's identity or masculinity. This creates a painful isolation, forcing many to suffer in silence rather than face the social consequences of explaining their very real, yet deeply misunderstood, anxiety. It is a lonely battle against a fear that the world has decided to embrace. The quiet dread of a simple shower can feel like a death sentence. Ablutophobia is a persistent, debilitating terror of washing or bathing, a condition far removed from laziness or simple dislike. This is a genuine anxiety disorder that hijacks a basic act of self-care and twists it into a source of overwhelming panic. The thought of stepping into a bath or turning on the shower taps can trigger a full-blown fight or flight response with a racing heart, shortness of breath, and a desperate urge to escape. For those living with this fear, the bathroom is not a place of relaxation but a chamber of horrors. The sound of running water might evoke a primal fear of drowning, the smooth surface of the tub a terrifying risk of slipping and falling, and the enclosed space of the shower stall a suffocating feeling of losing all control. This paralyzing anxiety forces a heartbreaking choice between enduring the terror of cleaning or facing the severe consequences of avoiding it, a cycle that often leads to profound social isolation and significant health problems. The constant fear of being judged for one's appearance or odor can make leaving the house an ordeal, straining relationships and jeopardizing careers. It is a lonely prison built not from a lack of will, but from a deep and uncontrollable fear of the very water meant to cleanse. The consequences of this fear ripple through every corner of a person's life. Maintaining steady employment becomes a monumental challenge, as the simple act of preparing for work can trigger a panic attack. The constant anxiety over body odor or appearance can make it impossible to focus in meetings or collaborate closely with colleagues, often leading to unexplained job loss or a retreat into isolated, remote work. Forming and keeping relationships is even more difficult. The fear of being judged or rejected for something as fundamental as personal hygiene creates a wall of shame, preventing intimacy and fostering a deep, profound loneliness. Beyond the social and emotional toll, the physical health risks are severe. Without regular cleansing, the skin becomes vulnerable to painful infections, fungal growths, and chronic conditions that can require medical intervention. This creates a vicious cycle where the fear of washing leads to health problems that only compound the anxiety and shame, making the act of bathing seem even more daunting. The secrecy surrounding this condition is its own unique burden. Sufferers become masters of deception, using heavy perfumes, always wearing long sleeves, or making constant excuses to avoid situations where their secret might be discovered. They live in terror of a casual comment from a friend or a wrinkled nose from a stranger, each one confirming their deepest fears and reinforcing the isolation. Yet pathways to reclaiming a life free from this fear do exist, and they begin with immense courage. Treatment often starts with cognitive behavioral therapy, a process that gently and patiently retrains the brain's fear response. A therapist might begin not in a bathroom, but in a safe office, simply talking about water. The first real step could be as small as washing just the fingertips for 5 seconds, a victory celebrated without judgment. From there, the journey continues at the individual's own pace, perhaps progressing to running a damp cloth over an arm, then standing in a dry shower, and eventually, with time and unwavering support, feeling the water on the skin without panic. This gradual exposure within a supportive and non-judgmental environment teaches the brain that this essential act of self-care is not a threat. It is a slow, patient rebuilding of trust with one's own body and the world, a quiet triumph over a fear that once controlled everything. The stillness of the night holds a special terror for those who see sleep not as rest, but as a surrender. Somnophobia is the intense, irrational fear of falling asleep, a condition far beyond simple insomnia. While an insomniac desperately wants to sleep but cannot, a person with somnophobia is actively terrified of the very idea of it. Their dread is rooted in the absolute loss of control and the profound vulnerability that sleep demands. Lying down in a dark room and closing your eyes means letting your guard down completely, entering a state where you cannot monitor your surroundings or protect yourself. For these individuals, the bed becomes a dangerous place, and the approach of bedtime triggers a surge of anxiety as potent as facing a physical threat. Common triggers for this fear are as varied as they are distressing. Some are haunted by the anticipation of vivid, recurring nightmares, dreading a nightly return to a subconscious world of terror. Others grapple with thanatophobia, a specific fear of death, convinced that if they allow themselves to sleep, their body will simply shut down and they will never wake up. There is also the fear of sleepwalking or talking, of losing agency over one's own body and doing something embarrassing or dangerous without any memory of it. This creates an impossible dilemma, a nightly standoff between the body's desperate need for rest and the mind's frantic warnings of peril. The resulting behavior is a heartbreaking cycle of avoidance. A person might binge watch television until dawn, immerse themselves in frantic cleaning, or find any possible excuse to stay active, all to postpone the moment they must face the darkness. This deliberate sleep deprivation, of course, leads to severe mental and physical fatigue, which only amplifies the existing anxiety. Exhaustion makes the brain more prone to irrational fears and panic, tightening the vicious cycle. The very thing they fear, sleep, becomes even more monstrous because their desperate attempts to avoid it make their mind a more fertile ground for terror. This is a battle fought in the quietest hours, where the simple, essential act of closing one's eyes feels like the most dangerous leap of faith. The struggle against sleep is a war of attrition on the body and mind. Night after night of self-imposed wakefulness exacts a heavy toll, eroding the very foundations of health. Cognitive functions are the first to falter. The brain, starved of the restorative deep sleep it needs, begins to misfire. Simple decisions become overwhelming, concentration shatters, and memory lapses become frequent. This mental fog is often accompanied by a sharp downturn in mood. The sleep-deprived brain is more prone to irritability, anxiety, and depression, creating a feedback loop where the fear of sleep is amplified by the miserable state caused by avoiding it. Physically, the consequences are just as severe. The immune system weakens, leaving the body vulnerable to every passing virus. Blood pressure can rise, and the risk for more serious conditions like heart disease and diabetes increases over time. The body is essentially running an endless marathon without ever being allowed to stop for rest. This physical deterioration only fuels the psychological fear, making the idea of relinquishing control in sleep feel even more dangerous. The specific nightmares that haunt these wakeful hours are powerful fuel for the phobia. For some, the terror is sleep paralysis, that horrifying moment when the mind wakes up but the body remains frozen, often accompanied by a crushing sensation on the chest and terrifying hallucinations of shadowy figures in the room. For others, it is the relentless return of night terrors, episodes of intense screaming and flailing while still asleep, which are so traumatic that the person dreads their recurrence every single night. These are not just bad dreams, they are visceral, physiological events that train the brain to associate sleep with pure terror. Breaking this cycle requires a deliberate and compassionate strategy, beginning with the transformation of the bedroom itself. The goal is to build a sanctuary so safe and calming that it can slowly begin to challenge the brain's fear response. This means removing all reminders of wakefulness, like televisions and phones, and introducing elements that signal pure safety. Soft, dim lighting, heavy blankets that provide a gentle weight, and calming sounds like a white noise machine can all help rewire the environment from a place of danger to one of refuge. Establishing a rigid, wind-down routine an hour before bed tells the brain that sleep is approaching in a predictable, non-threatening way. For many, professional help is the key to reclaiming the night. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, is a specially designed approach that goes beyond simple sleep hygiene. A therapist works to dismantle the catastrophic thoughts surrounding sleep, challenging beliefs like, if I fall asleep, I will die, and replacing them with evidence-based, calmer perspectives. They also introduce techniques like stimulus control, which strengthens the mental link between the bed and sleep by insisting you only get into bed when truly sleepy. In some persistent cases, a doctor might prescribe short-term medication to help break the initial cycle of fear and exhaustion, providing a window of rest that makes the deeper psychological work of therapy possible. This is not a surrender, but a strategic tool used under careful supervision to help the brain remember what safety feels like. The journey back to peaceful sleep is a slow reconstruction of trust, a patient proof to the deepest, most fearful parts of the mind that it is finally safe to close your eyes. A lotus seed pod should be a thing of serene beauty, its geometric perfection a marvel of nature, but for millions, this same pattern triggers a wave of visceral disgust. This is trypophobia, a powerful aversion to clusters of small holes, the sight of a honeycomb, a sponge, or even the bubbly texture of a chocolate bar can cause skin-crawling sensations, intense itching, and full-blown panic attacks. The reaction is so immediate and physical that it feels like a primal warning. Your brain is screaming that something is wrong, that this pattern is dangerous, even though you know logically it is just a plant or a food. Scientists are still debating its official status, which is why you will not find trypophobia listed in the main manual for mental health conditions. Yet the sheer number of people who report this identical, powerful reaction confirms it is a very real experience. One leading theory suggests this fear is an ancient evolutionary holdover. The irregular clusters of holes might subconsciously remind our brains of patterns found in nature that signal genuine danger. Think of the spotted skin of a poisonous blue-ringed octopus or the circular lesions of a deadly disease like smallpox. Our ancestors who felt a jolt of revulsion and stayed away from these patterns were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. That deep-seated survival instinct, meant to protect us from poison and sickness, might now be misfiring at the sight of a harmless lotus pod or a slice of sourdough bread. It is a ghost of an ancient fear haunting us in the most mundane places. The internet has become an accidental laboratory for this deep-seated disgust. Viral images and so-called challenge videos deliberately amplify the reaction, turning a personal unease into a shared, often cruel, spectacle. These digital traps are crafted with one purpose: to weaponize those whole patterns and provoke the most intense physical response possible. This constant online exposure has forced the psychological community to grapple with a difficult question: is trypophobia a genuine, diagnosable phobia, or is it simply a primal reflex of disgust? The debate hinges on whether the reaction is a true, paralyzing fear or a powerful feeling of revulsion. For the person experiencing it, the distinction hardly matters when the sight of a crumpet or a wasp's nest makes their skin crawl. Everyday life becomes a minefield of unexpected triggers. The simple pleasure of breaking off a piece of aerated chocolate can turn sour in an instant as the tiny bubbles are revealed. Popping bubble wrap shifts from a satisfying pastime to a source of profound discomfort. Even a walk through a home goods store is risky, with natural sea sponges and certain shower loofahs posing a hidden threat. For those who love nature, a documentary about coral reefs can become unwatchable as the close-up shots of porous coral and sea sponges trigger that familiar wave of nausea. This is a fear deeply embedded in the texture of the world itself, making complete avoidance nearly impossible. The painted smile is a mask that hides everything and reveals nothing. Coulrophobia, the fear of clowns, taps into a deep psychological discomfort with the unknown. That fixed, exaggerated grin and the stark white makeup create a disturbing void where a real human face should be. This phenomenon is a classic example of the uncanny valley, a term describing our revulsion when something looks almost human, but something is subtly, terrifyingly off. A clown's features are a grotesque caricature of human expression, triggering an instinctual alarm in our brains that screams, "This is not right." We cannot read their true emotions or intentions, which makes them fundamentally unpredictable and therefore threatening. Is that smile genuine joy or a cover for something sinister? We have no way of knowing, and that uncertainty is the perfect breeding ground for fear. Pop culture has expertly weaponized this innate unease. Stephen King's Pennywise from It is not just a monster, it is a shapeshifter that uses the clown form to lure its prey, exploiting the trust children place in a familiar figure of fun. Batman's Joker takes this a step further, presenting a clown not as a simple prankster, but as an agent of pure, chaotic evil whose laughter echoes alongside acts of violence. These iconic characters did not create the fear of clowns, but they gave it a powerful and enduring face, cementing the image of the evil clown in our collective consciousness. Beyond the static mask and cultural boogeyman, the core of the terror lies in a clown's unpredictable behavior. Their actions defy social norms, they are loud, intrusive, and their humor is often based on mockery or surprise. The classic squirting flower is not just a joke, it is a violation of personal space and a lesson that you cannot trust what you see. This constant state of not knowing what they will do next, combined with the impossibility of discerning their real mood, creates a profound sense of powerlessness. A child's birthday party becomes a tense ordeal, and a community carnival transforms from a place of joy into a landscape of potential threats, hiding behind grease paint and a permanent, unsettling smile. That painted smile no longer stays confined to the circus tent. It now appears in the most mundane places, turning a child's birthday party into a potential scene of terror. The local entertainer hired to twist balloons and make silly voices can trigger a full-scale panic attack in someone with phobia, their cheerful antics feeling like a sinister performance. This fear extends even to the commercial world, where the friendly, waving figures of certain fast food mascots are not seen as welcoming but as unsettling giants with frozen, unnatural expressions. The annual town parade or a summer festival becomes an exercise in hypervigilance, a constant scanning of the crowd for the telltale white face and colorful wig, ready to bolt at a moment's notice. For parents whose children live with this phobia, the world becomes a complex navigational challenge. How do you explain to a well-meaning relative that the clown they hired for a family gathering will send your son hiding under a bed for hours? How do you navigate a friend's party knowing that the guest of honor's father plans to surprise everyone by dressing as a clown? These are not hypotheticals, but real social dilemmas that force parents into difficult positions, often having to advocate for their child's very real distress in a world that dismisses it as a silly phase. It is a lonely stand against a symbol of fun, protecting a child from an anxiety that most people simply do not understand. Your phone is not just a device, it is a digital lifeline. Nomophobia is the intense, irrational fear of being without your mobile phone or being unable to use it. This distinctly modern anxiety manifests as a cold sweat when you pat your pocket and find it empty, a racing heart when you see your battery dip into the red zone, or a rising sense of dread when your screen displays those two dreaded words, "no service." The symptoms are visceral, a full-blown panic attack triggered not by a spider or a height, but by a sudden, forced disconnection from the digital world. At its core, this phobia is rarely about the physical object itself. It is a tangled web of deeper fears, a terror of being cut off from your social identity, a paralyzing fear of missing out on every conversation and event happening without you, and a primal anxiety about being unable to call for help if an emergency strikes. Your phone is your map, your wallet, your social circle, and your safety net, all condensed into a single, fragile piece of glass and metal. Losing it does not feel like misplacing a possession, it feels like an amputation of your connection to life itself. This phobia holds up a stark mirror to our profound dependency, revealing how technology has rewired our fundamental sense of security and belonging. We have outsourced our memories to its cloud, our sense of direction to its GPS, and our social validation to its endless stream of notifications. To be without it is to feel utterly lost, vulnerable, and alone, a castaway in a silent world where everyone else is still connected. This constant digital tether rewires our most fundamental social instincts. A dinner table becomes a silent battleground where every glance at a notification is a small withdrawal from the human connection right in front of you. The art of conversation, with its natural pauses and eye contact, withers when your attention is perpetually divided. You might feel a phantom vibration in your pocket, a ghost signal from a device that is not even there, pulling your focus away from a friend sharing a personal story. This erosion of presence does not just make interactions shallow, it actively trains your brain to find the unpredictable flow of a real conversation less stimulating than the curated, instant gratification of a social media feed. The physical symptoms of separation are a testament to how deeply this dependency is rooted. That frantic patting of your pockets, the cold sweat when you realize your phone is not on your desk, the sharp spike in your heart rate when you think it is lost, these are not imagined. They are the classic signs of a panic attack, triggered not by a predator, but by a disconnected screen. Your body responds to this digital absence with the same primal alarm system it would use if you were suddenly stranded in an unfamiliar place, because in a very real sense, you are. Your map, your communications, and your social identity have vanished. Managing this anxiety requires a conscious, deliberate strategy, a digital detox that feels less like a punishment and more like a reclaiming of your own attention. It begins with small, non-negotiable boundaries. Designate the first hour of your day as phone-free, allowing your mind to wake up to the world instead of a news feed. Create sacred spaces in your home, like the dining table or the bedroom, where devices are simply not allowed. When you are with friends, try the phone stack game, where everyone places their device in the center of the table, and the first person to grab theirs buys the next round. These practices are not about rejecting technology, but about relearning how to be bored, how to be present, and how to find validation in a shared laugh rather than a like. It is a quiet rebellion against the constant pull, a way to prove to your own anxious brain that you are still whole, even when you are offline. A slice of pizza should be a universal comfort, but for some, it is a platter of pure dread. Phobia is an intense, irrational fear of cheese that goes far beyond a simple dislike. The mere sight of a cheese platter can trigger nausea. The smell of a grilled cheese sandwich might induce a panic attack, and the thought of its texture on the tongue can feel utterly paralyzing. This is not a dietary choice, but a deep-seated phobia where the brain perceives cheese as a genuine threat, activating the same primal fight or flight response as a lurking predator. The origins of this fear are often rooted in a single, forgotten moment from early childhood. A forceful feeding experience where a piece of cheese was shoved into a toddler's mouth against their will can create a powerful negative association that lasts for decades. For others, the aversion is purely sensory, a neurological wiring that interprets the squishy, oily, or crumbly textures of different cheeses as something revolting, similar to how trypophobia reacts to clusters of holes. There is also a subconscious link to decay, as the very processes that create cheese, involving aging, mold, and bacterial cultures, can subconsciously signal rot and contamination to a vulnerable mind. This transforms a common food into a symbol of something spoiled and unsafe. Navigating social life with this fear is a constant, exhausting exercise in avoidance and explanation. The American diet is practically built on a foundation of cheese, making every restaurant outing, every office party, and every family dinner a potential minefield. A simple work lunch becomes a high-stakes negotiation, carefully requesting a burger with no cheese, and then anxiously watching the kitchen to ensure the request is honored. A dinner date can turn awkward when you have to explain why you are pushing the cheesy au gratin potatoes to the far side of your plate. Birthday parties are especially difficult, as you have to find a polite way to decline a slice of cake without offending the host, all while the cheesy pizza on the main table feels like it is taunting you. The fear forces a life of meticulous planning and quiet anxiety, where the simple act of sharing a meal becomes a source of profound stress and isolation. Every restaurant menu becomes a high-stakes puzzle, Each description must be scanned for hidden cheese, a task that turns a simple lunch into a strategic operation. You learn to ask a dozen clarifying questions, your heart sinking when a server casually mentions the kitchen cannot accommodate a request. The phrase, "it comes with cheese melted on top," is not a description, it is a verdict. This constant state of alertness is mentally draining, forcing you to be on guard in the very places meant for relaxation and connection. The social toll is even heavier. A friend's elegant wine and cheese night is not a party, it is a minefield of aromatic threats. You have to find a polite way to refuse every offering, each decline feeling like a personal rejection to the host. The well-meaning pressure from others, "Oh, just try it, you will love this one," feels like a violation of a very real boundary. Over time, the easiest solution becomes to simply avoid these gatherings altogether, leading to a slow, quiet erosion of your social life. This retreat is not by choice, but by necessity, a defense mechanism against the anxiety and the exhausting effort of constant explanation. For some, this extreme aversion is more than a phobia. It can be a symptom of a broader condition known as avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or RFID. Unlike typical picky eating, RFID is a diagnosed eating disorder where a person severely limits the types or amounts of food they eat, not due to concerns about body weight, but because of sensory issues, a lack of interest in eating, or a fear of the consequences, like choking or vomiting. In the case of trypophobia, the fear and disgust towards cheese can be so overwhelming that it fits squarely within this diagnostic framework. The distress is profound and tangible, a daily struggle that others might dismiss as a quirky preference. The loneliness that comes from watching everyone else bond over shared pizza while you quietly eat a side salad is a genuine emotional pain. It is the exhausting work of navigating a world that seems to celebrate the very thing you fear, a constant reminder that your normal is not the world's normal. That sticky, claustrophobic sensation is a moment of pure terror for some. Arachibutyrophobia is the intense fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth, a panic that goes far beyond a minor annoyance with the texture. This is a genuine phobia where the physical feeling of the paste clinging to the palate triggers a primal suffocation alarm. The brain interprets that temporary stickiness as a life-threatening obstruction, launching a full-blown fight or flight response. Your heart might pound, your throat can feel like it is closing, and a cold sweat breaks out, all because of a simple sandwich spread. The origins of this fear are often traced back to a single, formative incident. A childhood choking scare, perhaps while eating a thick glob of peanut butter on a cracker, can forge a powerful and lasting neural connection between that sticky feeling and the terror of being unable to breathe. For others, there is no specific traumatic memory, just an innate oversensitivity to certain food textures. The thick, gummy, and adhesive quality of peanut butter is processed by their nervous system as something dangerous and revolting, similar to how someone might react to slime or mucus. This is not a choice, but a deep-seated, visceral reaction that logic cannot easily override. Living with this fear demands a strict set of dietary rules. The most common strategy is complete avoidance, a simple but socially complicated solution. This means saying no to peanut butter cookies at a bake sale, skipping the classic peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a lunchbox, and meticulously checking ingredient lists for any hidden presents. For those who attempt to manage the fear rather than eliminate the food, consumption becomes a carefully controlled ritual. They might only eat peanut butter in microscopic amounts, spread so thinly it is barely there, and always with a large glass of water or milk nearby to immediately wash down any clinging residue. Every bite is a tense negotiation, a test of nerve where the simple, joyful act of eating is shadowed by the looming dread of that familiar, terrifying stickiness. This single, specific fear of peanut butter can ripple outward, creating a domino effect of new anxieties. The terror of that sticky sensation does not always stay confined to one food. It can generalize, turning other gooey or adhesive textures into objects of dread. A marshmallow melting in a campfire, a s'more, a piece of saltwater taffy stretching between your fingers. or even the stringy pull of melted mozzarella on a pizza slice can all trigger the same suffocating panic. The brain has learned a dangerous lesson that sticky equals trapped, and it begins to apply that rule to a wide range of foods. For a child developing this phobia, the nutritional impact can be significant. Peanut butter is often a reliable, affordable source of protein and healthy fats, a staple in many households. When that food becomes a source of terror, parents face a difficult challenge trying to find alternative nutrients while navigating their child's very real distress. Mealtimes become battlegrounds filled with tears and resistance as the child's world of safe foods shrinks, potentially leading to deficiencies if not carefully managed. The path back from this fear is a slow and patient journey of rebuilding trust, often guided by a therapist using exposure therapy. This is not about forcing someone to eat a spoonful of peanut butter. It begins with the absolute least threatening step possible. A session might start with simply having a sealed jar of peanut butter in the same room. The next step could be opening the jar to smell it without any pressure to taste. The first physical contact might be just dipping the very tip of a finger into a tiny, smooth amount, perhaps just licking a minuscule dot off the skin. Each small step is taken only when the person feels ready, always in a calm and controlled environment where they feel completely safe. Over many sessions, the exposure gradually increases, moving to spreading a paper-thin layer on a cracker, then a slightly thicker layer, and eventually taking a small, manageable bite with a drink close at hand. The goal is not to make someone love peanut butter, but to break the catastrophic association between the texture and the feeling of suffocation. It is a process of teaching the brain, bite by tiny bite, that this sticky substance is not a threat to your life. The human knee is a biological marvel, a complex hinge of bone and ligament that carries us through life, yet for some, its very sight is a source of deep unease. Genophobia is an intense, often irrational fear of knees, a condition where the simple appearance of this common joint can trigger feelings of disgust, anxiety, or even full-blown panic. This is not a mild dislike, it is a visceral reaction to seeing, touching, or even thinking about knees, whether they are your own or someone else's. The origins of this highly specific fear are often buried in a past physical trauma. A severe childhood knee injury, the painful memory of surgery, or even just witnessing a gruesome athletic accident can forge a powerful link between the knee and feelings of vulnerability and pain. For others, the fear is more aesthetic, a deep-seated revulsion towards the knee structure. The way the patella sits, the visible tendons, or the general appearance of the joint can be perceived as unnatural or unsettling, triggering a response similar to how others might react to a spider or a snake. This phobia forces a life of constant, careful management. Summertime becomes a season of stress as the sight of people in shorts or skirts exposes the very thing they dread. Choosing an outfit means automatically reaching for long pants or maxi skirts, regardless of the temperature, creating a personal uniform designed for concealment. Participating in sports or gym classes is fraught with anxiety, as activities from soccer to yoga draw direct attention to the bending and flexing of the knee joint. Even something as simple as sitting becomes a calculated act. Crossing your legs might feel too revealing, so you keep them firmly planted, and you might find yourself avoiding low couches or chairs that require a deep, visible bend. This is a private struggle waged against a part of the body the rest of the world takes for granted, a quiet negotiation with a fear that is always, quite literally, close to home. The social isolation this fear creates is a quiet, constant burden. Explaining to a friend why you cannot join their summer volleyball game is an exercise in awkwardness. How do you articulate that the sight of bouncing kneecaps under the net is what fills you with dread, not the sport itself? Partners might be hurt or confused when you recoil from a casual touch, misinterpreting a deep-seated phobia as a personal rejection. Even doctors who are trained to be understanding can sometimes struggle to mask their initial bemusement when a patient describes an intense fear of their own knees. This fear of being seen as ridiculous or obsessive often forces people into silence, enduring their anxiety alone rather than facing the potential judgment of others. The path forward, however, lies in gently rewiring the brain's catastrophic associations. Cognitive behavioral therapy begins by challenging the automatic thoughts that knees are disgusting or inherently dangerous. A therapist guides you to question these beliefs, asking for evidence that a knee is truly threatening or objectively revolting. This process of cognitive restructuring helps build a new, more rational narrative, separating the knee from the traumatic memory or the irrational disgust it represents. Alongside this mental work comes the slow, patient practice of exposure. The first step is not to touch a knee, but perhaps just to look at a simple, diagrammatic drawing of one. The next session might involve viewing a photograph of a clothed person, focusing on managing the anxiety until it subsides. Over time, the exposure becomes more direct, progressing to looking at your own knee in a mirror while using calming techniques, then lightly touching it through fabric, and eventually skin to skin. Each small victory in this controlled environment proves to the amygdala, the brain's fear center, that a knee is not a threat. It is a gradual journey of reclaiming comfort in your own skin and in the world, transforming a source of panic into just another part of the body. Your own body can become a landscape of hidden terrors. Omphallophobia is the intense, irrational fear of belly buttons, a condition where the sight or thought of a navel, whether your own or someone else's, can trigger profound anxiety. This is not a casual dislike. It is a deep-seated dread that can be ignited by the simple act of someone absent-mindedly touching their stomach, a glimpse of a midriff in a movie, or even the internal sensation of the navel's connection to something deep within the body. The belly button, a harmless scar marking our first connection to life, becomes a source of revulsion and fear. For some, the anxiety is rooted in a forgotten story from early childhood. A traumatic tale about the umbilical cord being cut, perhaps told with unsettling detail, can plant a seed of fear that this spot is a vulnerable, even painful, remnant. For others, the fear is more abstract, a deep unease with the idea that this small indentation or protrusion is somehow connected internally to their organs, a visceral reminder of the body's strange and fragile inner workings. Then there is the simple disgust factor. The belly button is a magnet for lint, dead skin, and perceived filth, a collection that can transform it in someone's mind from a neutral body part into a tiny, unclean cavern. This combination of physical revulsion and psychological unease makes the navel a constant, hidden source of distress. Imagine the daily challenge of getting dressed, where every waistband becomes a potential source of accidental contact. A hug from a friend can turn into a moment of tension if their hand brushes too close. Changing for the gym requires strategic positioning, always turning your back to shield this small part of yourself from view. Even a relaxing day at the beach is fraught with anxiety, a self-conscious awareness of your own navel and the sight of others, turning a place of leisure into a field of quiet dread. This fear forces a person to be hyper-aware of their own body in a way that most people never are, making a universal human feature feel like a personal flaw and a source of secret panic. The cultural weight placed on the navel can add another layer of dread to this very personal fear. In many spiritual traditions, the belly button is considered a sacred energy center, the very seat of life force and personal power. For someone with omphallophobia, this profound significance does not inspire awe, but amplifies their terror. The idea that this unsettling part of their body holds such immense, mysterious energy can feel overwhelming, turning a source of disgust into a locus of supernatural anxiety. This paradox means that yoga or meditation classes, which are meant to be calming, can become intensely stressful if the instructor begins discussing the chakras and focuses attention on the navel. Everyday situations become a series of calculated maneuvers to maintain a sense of safety. A day at the beach requires a strategic choice of a one-piece swimsuit or a high-waisted bottom, and even then, applying sunscreen becomes a tense, private ritual. The simple fashion of a crop top is completely off the table, not by choice, but by necessity. A routine physical exam at the doctor's office is a major source of anxiety, requiring a preemptive conversation with the physician to request they avoid any contact or even prolonged looking at the navel. To cope, many develop meticulous avoidance techniques that provide a crucial sense of control. Some wear a small, discreet bandage over their navel every single day, creating a physical and psychological barrier. Others adopt a permanent uniform of high-waisted pants and long shirts, building a wardrobe that ensures complete coverage in all situations. This constant vigilance is exhausting, but the relief that comes from knowing this vulnerable spot is hidden and protected is immense. It is a small, personal victory in a world that constantly threatens to expose the very thing that fills them with such deep, inexplicable dread. From the silent gaze of a duck to the sticky terror of peanut butter, we have navigated a truly bizarre landscape of hidden fears. These phobias, as irrational as they may seem, are anchors for very real and debilitating anxiety. They prove that the human mind can weave terror from the most ordinary threads of life, from a cluster of holes to the simple bend of a knee. Recognizing one of these fears in yourself is not a sign of strangeness, but a reminder of our shared, complex humanity. Our brains are wired for survival in an ancient world, and sometimes those ancient wires get crossed, attaching a primal panic to a long word or a belly button. The next time you see someone react with unexplained discomfort to a common situation, remember the quiet dread of a clown's smile or the paralyzing fear of falling asleep. A little understanding can go a long way, so tell us in the comments which of these secret phobias did you recognize in yourself? What other strange fears have you encountered in your own life? Share your stories and subscribe for more journeys into the wonderfully weird facts hiding in plain sight.